It was a quiet Tuesday morning. The kind where the sky is dull and the air feels heavy, like it knows something is about to go wrong. John Miller, a decorated Army veteran, was driving his wife Linda to the local hospital. She had been sick for weeks, and that morning her fever had spiked. She could barely speak. John, always calm under pressure, focused on the road. The hospital wasn't far. Just 10 minutes from their small suburban home. Linda leaned against the passenger window, her eyes half closed, her breath shaky. When they pulled up to the emergency entrance, John jumped out and rushed to her side. He gently opened the door and helped her out. She was weak, her steps uneven. He wrapped one arm around her waist and supported her with the other. As they approached the entrance, a voice barked from the side. "Sir, you can't park there. Move the vehicle now." John looked over. 2 hospital security officers were approaching fast. They looked tense, hands on their belts like they were expecting trouble. John stayed calm. "She needs help. I'll move it in a second. She can walk. This is an emergency zone. Step away from the door." One of them snapped. Linda groaned softly, her legs shaking. She wasn't okay. John tightened his grip around her. "She's burning up. She needs to get inside." One guard reached for his radio. The other one stepped closer. "I said step away from the door." "I served 3 tours for this country," John replied, still holding Linda. "I'm not trying to cause trouble." The officer's hand went to his taser. "Last warning." John looked down at Linda. She was barely standing now. And then, it happened. The taser clicked. Electricity cracked. Linda screamed as she collapsed to the ground, shaking uncontrollably. John froze. For a moment, time stopped. People nearby gasped. A nurse who had just stepped outside dropped her clipboard. A mother with a toddler stood in shock near the entrance. Even the second guard hesitated. John dropped to his knees beside his wife. Her eyes were wide. Her body trembled. The silence was unbearable. And then, in a voice calm and cold as steel, John looked up and said 6 words that hit harder than any weapon. "She fought cancer. I fought war." The chaos began instantly. Linda lay trembling on the pavement, her hospital gown soaked in sweat. John was still kneeling, one hand on her shoulder, the other shielding her from the guards. His face was stone. His jaw clenched. The first security guard took a step back, realizing what he had done. The second looked stunned. A few onlookers had started filming with their phones. Murmurs rose in the air, whispers of disbelief and anger. A nurse sprinted from inside, yelling, "What the hell happened?" "She needed help," someone shouted. "They tossed her." The nurse dropped beside Linda and checked her pulse. Her eyes shot up at the guards. "She's in crisis. Get a stretcher. Now." John didn't say another word. He just kept his hand on Linda's back, whispering something only she could hear. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't lashing out. He had seen worse in war zones. But never anything like this at home. Another nurse ran over with a gurney. Within seconds, Linda was being lifted. Her body twitched. Her breathing was shallow. But she was alive. John stood up slowly. The same calm, cold expression never left his face. The lead guard tried to explain. "Sir, we didn't know. She didn't look that sick." John turned to face him. "She didn't look that sick? That's your excuse." We just followed protocol." John cut him off, voice still low. "I held my friend's hand when he died in Afghanistan. You don't tase first and ask questions later." The guard looked down, speechless. The nurses wheeled Linda inside. John followed without asking permission. No one dared stop him now. Inside, the ER was buzzing. Staff whispered, nurses hurried, doctors asked questions. One nurse pulled John aside to get details. His answers were clear, precise. Years of military service had trained him to stay calm in disaster. But deep down, he was boiling. A hospital administrator soon appeared. A woman in her early 50s, glasses in one hand, tablet in the other. She looked rattled. "Mr. Miller?" she asked gently. He nodded. I'm so sorry for what happened. I've seen the footage. It shouldn't have gone down like that. John didn't respond. We're admitting your wife immediately. She's stable, but we need to run tests. Will she be okay? He finally asked. We're doing everything we can. She paused, then added, I want you to know those officers are being pulled off duty. There will be an investigation. John looked her in the eye. An investigation isn't enough. Then he turned and walked toward the ICU doors, not waiting for her response. Linda was placed in a quiet room in the ICU. Her heart monitor beeped steadily, and 4 dripped beside her bed. Machines blinked softly as nurses moved around her, adjusting tubes and whispering updates. She was conscious but barely awake, her eyes fluttering open and closed. John sat by her side, holding her hand. His large fingers wrapped around hers gently, as if afraid to hurt her again. Her skin was warm, her breathing slow, but stable. He didn't cry. He hadn't cried in years. But something inside him cracked wide open. Linda had been his rock during every deployment. The one who sent letters when no one else remembered. The one who stayed up during video calls even when she worked long shifts. She'd waited. She'd prayed. She'd built a life while he served overseas. And now, this. He glanced at the band-aid on her neck where the taser prongs had pierced. It was small, but the pain behind it wasn't. Just then, the door creaked open. A young woman in scrubs stepped in, holding a folder. Mr. Miller. I'm Mia. I'll be her nurse for the evening. He nodded without standing. Mia looked at the chart, then back at him. She's stable, but she's dehydrated and has a severe infection. We're starting antibiotics. She's lucky you brought her in when you did. John exhaled slowly. She almost didn't make it through the front door. Mia paused. She knew what he meant. The entire hospital was already buzzing about it. The footage from someone's phone had been shared with hospital staff, and beyond. You saved her, Mia said softly. I was just trying to get her help. No, Mia said, stepping forward. You stayed calm. You didn't escalate. That matters. Some people panic. You didn't. John didn't answer. Mia placed the folder down and added, the video is going viral. People are asking questions. He didn't care about the internet. He only cared about Linda. But a tiny spark lit in his chest. Maybe this time, someone would listen. Maybe this time, there would be consequences. Real ones. Linda stirred slightly. Her eyes opened halfway. John. He stood and leaned over her. I'm here, baby. You're safe. She nodded weakly and slipped back into sleep. Mia stepped out to give them privacy. John sat back down, gripping Linda's hand tighter now. But not from fear. This time, it was resolve. The next morning, the hospital was buzzing. News vans lined the sidewalk. Reporters stood in clusters outside the main entrance. Cameras flashed. Microphones were raised. The video had exploded overnight. Millions of people had seen it. A war veteran calmly protecting his sick wife. Security guards using force instead of reason. And then those 6 words. She fought cancer. I fought war. The world had heard them. And the world had reacted. Inside the hospital, John stood at the end of Linda's bed. She was stronger today, awake, speaking softly, sipping water through a straw. A doctor entered the room with a clipboard and a gentle smile. Mrs. Miller, your infection is under control. With a few more days of treatment, you'll be going home. Linda nodded, tired but grateful. The doctor turned to John. Sir, I don't usually say this to families, but what you endured yesterday, it wasn't right. And we know it. John gave a slow nod. He wasn't looking for sympathy. He was looking for change. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. A hospital staffer peeked in. Mr. Miller, there's someone here who'd like to speak with you. John walked out into the hallway. Standing there was a tall man in a tailored suit, clean-shaven with a sharp expression. A pin on his lapel read VA, Veterans Affairs. Mr. Miller, the man said, offering a hand. I'm Marcus Reed. I work with the Department of Veterans Affairs. I saw the footage. Everyone has. John shook his hand without emotion. I came because this can't happen again, Marcus said. Not to a veteran. Not to anyone. I've spoken with the hospital board. The 2 guards involved have been suspended indefinitely. The VA is filing a formal complaint. We're also starting a task force, one that puts veterans and their families first. Medical, legal, emotional. All of it. John didn't say anything at first. Then he asked, "Why now? Why does it take a video to make people care?" Marcus paused. Because the right story shakes the right people. And this one did. Down the hall, a nurse wheeled a patient past them. A boy, maybe 10, with a cast on his arm. He smiled at John. "Are you the hero from TV?" John looked at him, surprised. "No," he said, managing a small smile. "Just a husband." The boy gave a thumbs up and kept rolling down the hallway. Marcus watched the exchange and said, "You know, Mr. Miller, those 6 words, they've started something. There's a petition with over 1 million signatures demanding new hospital policies. Your story is waking people up." John didn't want fame. He didn't want a spotlight. But if what happened to Linda could prevent the next family from suffering, then maybe it was worth it. He looked back toward the ICU door. "I didn't say those words to start a movement," he said. "I said them because they were true." 2 days later, Linda was well enough to leave the hospital. John helped her into a wheelchair, placing a blanket over her legs. She looked stronger. Her color had returned. Her voice had more weight. But her eyes still carried the memory of that moment outside, the flash of electricity, the pain, the fear. They rolled through the hospital corridor together, heads turning as they passed. Doctors nodded. Nurses smiled. Even the cafeteria staff paused to wave. It wasn't just respect. It was quiet guilt. Outside, the sun was bright. Clear skies. Warm breeze. A complete contrast to the tension that had wrapped around the place just 48 hours before. A hospital administrator waited near the exit with a clipboard in hand. Her name tag read Michelle Alvarez, the same woman who had spoken to John on the day of the incident. "Mr. and Mrs. Miller," she greeted, her voice steady but sincere. "I know you're eager to go home, but before you do, I wanted to personally apologize again." John nodded slowly. Linda gave a small, forgiving smile. Michelle continued, "We've changed our emergency protocols. Starting next week, our security staff will go through mandatory training on de-escalation, medical crisis recognition, and how to approach families in distress." John glanced at Linda, then back at Michelle. "That should have already been in place," he said quietly. "You're right," she replied. "But because of you, it finally is." A van pulled up to the curb. A driver stepped out, ready to help. But John waved him off and gently lifted Linda into the passenger seat himself, tucking her blanket in and kissing her forehead. Before getting in, he turned back to Michelle. "I served so people could feel safe at home," he said. "Yesterday, I didn't." Michelle didn't respond. She just nodded, the weight of those words hanging in the air. As the van pulled away, cameras didn't follow them. There were no speeches. No reporters. Just a man taking his wife home. John and Linda's home was quiet when they returned. The walls were lined with photos, wedding pictures, snapshots of military ceremonies, birthday parties from years past. Everything familiar. Everything comforting. Linda rested on the living room couch, her legs up, a warm cup of tea in her hands. The scent of lavender drifted from a nearby candle. John sat close beside her, one hand resting on her knee. "I missed this place," she whispered. He smiled. "Me too." For the first time in days, there was no noise. No machines. No flashing lights. Just peace. But the outside world hadn't moved on. Their story had become a national conversation. News programs replayed the video. Commentators debated the use of force. Experts weighed in on hospital security. And across the country, veterans and their families spoke up, many sharing their own painful stories of mistreatment and being ignored. John didn't want attention, but the emails started flooding in. From soldiers. From nurses. from people who'd seen the video and felt something change inside them. One message stood out. It was from a young Marine named Eric. "Sir, I saw what happened. I've struggled since coming home. Seeing you stand there, silent but strong, it made me feel like someone understands. Thank you for not yelling. Thank you for standing your ground. You gave people like me a voice." John stared at the screen for a long time. He had served in 3 combat zones. He had carried brothers off the battlefield. But now, in the quiet of his living room, he realized that courage looked different these days. Sometimes it meant speaking out. Sometimes it meant staying silent while the world watched. And sometimes it meant just standing next to someone you love when they need you most. Linda reached over and touched his hand. "You okay?" He nodded. "Just thinking." "About what?" He looked at her, then at the photos around them. "About how far we've come. And how much further we still need to go." They sat like that for a long time, 2 people who had been through war, through sickness, through pain, and had still found their way back to each other. Weeks passed. The world had moved on to other stories, but in quiet corners of the country, the ripple of John's 6 words continued to spread. In one hospital in Ohio, a nurse read them aloud during a morning briefing. "She fought cancer. I fought war." In Texas, a small-town sheriff used the story in training for his deputies. "Empathy first," he said, "or you lose the people you swore to protect." In Washington, a congressional committee mentioned the case by name. A bill was drafted, funding security reform and trauma response training in all VA-associated hospitals. And across the internet, the video still circled. Not as a shock clip, not as outrage bait, but as a reminder of restraint, of love, of the line between duty and dignity. Back at home, John had settled into a rhythm. Mornings with Linda. Gardening in the backyard. The smell of coffee in the kitchen. Phone calls from old army buddies checking in, some for the first time in years. One day, he sat on the porch as Linda read aloud from a letter they'd received. It was handwritten. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Miller, I was the rookie guard on duty that day. I didn't touch you. But I didn't stop it either. I froze. I panicked. And afterward, I lied in the report. I've turned in my badge. I'm now taking crisis response courses. I want to do better. Your words changed me. I'm sorry. D." John didn't respond right away. He just leaned back in his chair, looked at the blue sky, and nodded slowly. "Some fights," he said, "aren't about winning. They're about waking people up." Linda closed the letter gently, folded it, and placed it beside her tea. In the distance, wind chimes rang softly. A pair of birds flew across the yard. Peace, finally. John looked over at his wife, alive, safe, and beside him. He didn't need parades. He didn't need applause. He just needed this moment. This quiet. This love. Because in the end, that was what he'd fought for. And that was what he'd protected, even when no one else would.